Thank you so much for joining me today, David, on our next episode of Be The Drop. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Amelia.
And I see that you've brought in your items of significance, and you explained to me about both of these, and I just couldn't possibly decide one. So can you perhaps explain both of these items to us, because they're so lovely?
With pleasure. So a few years ago I went to St Thomas School in Goodwood, and they presented me with a cheque. And they also presented me with this rug that had been made by their knitting club. So each child in the knitting club had come up with a different design, so the red and white and the gold and so on. And then they'd put them all together. And as you can see by the size of the rug, there are a lot of children involved. And the young girl that gave me the rug asked me if it would keep a poor person warm that night. And it just melted me, and I thought it was just a fabulous thing. And I committed to her, yes it would, but what I've done with it is I keep it in my office, and every time I have someone of influence in my office, I put a bit of pressure on them by saying, this rug that is just in the coffee table, that's to keep someone warm tonight, and you're going to be the person that helps me keep someone warm tonight. So that's the role this rug has played for me, and it's been very successful in doing that. The other item that I had to bring along was a set of cufflinks. So this set of cufflinks was found by a friend when they were cleaning a home, actually down at Christie's Beach. And the person whose home they were cleaning was a volunteer dozens of years ago, I suspect 30 or 40 years ago, and they were giving the cufflinks as a sign of their service to Vinnies. And he didn't have any use for them anymore, so he said to the cleaner, will you take them? And he said, well, I'll give them to someone at Vinnies. So they've ended up with me. So what they do is remind me of the thousands of people that have volunteered for Vinnies in the past and the thousands that we do have now. That's the first thing it reminds me of. And the second thing, just because they're cufflinks and the formality of wearing cufflinks, it reminds me of the connection we need to have to corporate world, get them to understand that there's a whole lot of people on the other side of life who are just looking for their next meal, not the next dollar.
So that is quite a broad and diverse community. What is it that you think is the most uniting aspect that weaves in between those different and disparate groups?
That Vinnies is genuine about our desire to help people. We don't ask why, we don't ask the circumstances behind their situation, we just offer to help. So there's a whole lot of people that are really keen to provide that help, and there's literally thousands that need our help. So we have a Fred's van service that operates in 10 locations around the state, and it serves 40,000 meals a year. So quite literally, there are a lot of people that rely on that provision of food as their only contact in a social sense that they might get for 48 hours. For many of them, it's their only meal in that day. So there's a community that is created around each Fred's van service, be that at Kilburn, be it at Elizabeth, be it at Aldinga, be it in the city, that relies absolutely on what we do there. So in terms of the other aspects, the big end of town, if you like, we're providing the vehicle for people to get involved and for people to do something that makes them feel pretty good about themselves.
And make a difference.
Certainly makes a difference. Well, a meal is a difference for the obvious reasons between absolute destitution and having some hope in that tomorrow might be better.
Another important component of this community, which you've touched on, but I'd like to understand a little bit more, is the volunteers. Now, I can't remember the number of volunteers you mentioned, but it's quite significant and a large part of the organisation and the ability for you to provide the services that you do.
So at the moment we've got around 3,000 volunteers, which is the highest it's ever been. And Vinnies is an organisation that is absolutely geared up for volunteers. So it's the staff that support the volunteers rather than most organisations where the volunteers are supporting the staff. It's absolutely the other way around when it comes to the St Vincent de Paul Society. The staff are very clear in understanding that the work we do is supporting those out in the field. We get the air-conditioned office, we get some comfort. It's the volunteers that are doing the home visits, it's the volunteers that are buttering the bread to take out for meals at night. They're the ones doing the hard yards, so we just support them and providing opportunities for them to do their stuff.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, David, to find out more about Vinnies and the community and the work that you do. In conclusion though, can you share with me David's top communication tip?
In terms of the best method, the most effective way to do things is face-to-face. Really clear, no ambiguity, honest, which at times can be really difficult, but eyeball to eyeball and tell it how it is. I think that's the most effective way to communicate.
Brilliant.